Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Log In Audio Out Library of Games podcast. I'm your host, Hugo, and I'm here with my co host, Taylor. Say hi, Taylor.
Hello.
And today we have a very special episode on video game design, and we have two very special guests. We have Eric and Roger. So, when you guys can introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Eric. How you doing, guys? Um, I have been in college for video game design for too long, um, and if I had to pick a favorite game, or at least series of mine, it's really tough. But I guess I'd have to pick Halo, just because of the really good social experiences I've had with it.
Nice, okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Roger. I've been at Columbia College Chicago studying game design for about 3 years now, and I'm about to start my senior capstone. So, woo, fourth year major project. Yeah. And my favorite game is Kingdom Hearts. At least for right now, it's Kingdom Hearts just because I grew up with it. It's been with me since Mexico. Like, I here, Mexico, and then back. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So, the way we always usually do things is we like to ask questions and see on your responses. So today, video games take a big chunk of the media, and a lot of them are constantly taken for granted, specifically within terms of how they're made. And can can one of you guys tell me like what's your idea of the process of what it takes to make a video game?
I'll let you go first, Roger.
Okay. I mean, the process. Well, it really just depends on like what you're trying to work on. But usually the process is, from what I know, it is usually three major areas that are incorporated. So it's design, it's development, and it's like audio and visuals. So the artistic side. So you'll have animations, character models, backgrounds, foregrounds, all the like different aspects that come together to create the sort of ecosystem that you're playing in. But it's also the audio, which it also gets neglected a lot, at least player wise, because although like no one's like, oh, it's just audio, it's just you hearing things, no one really sees all of the like large technical effort that goes into creating these immersive sounds that really pull you into the environments. But like design is kind of like the medium between development and art, or at least the artistic side of game design, because what game design is trying to come together for both art and development. So you're speaking with the programmers as well as with the artists and trying to communicate effectively the limitations between the two. So how much the art people can implement and how much the programming and development people can implement to create the like environment and the idea that you're sort of going for. So the design people are there to like intermediate between the two. And then, the developers are there to create all of the features, the small aspects, like say jumping, or like the mini games, like kind of like Rehydrated did with their like multiplayer thing. It's like they're kind of there to develop all of the like damage outputs, all of the attacks, all of the different little things that you can do throughout the game, even if it's like snow crunching on the ground, or you shooting someone in an FPS. So that's my take on the game design process.
So then I suppose my mind doesn't differ too greatly from that. I started college years ago, and philosophies kind of, I guess, ebb and flow with a lot. So um, most of my experiences and education on the technical side of it, um, there's also obviously, of course, the art side, but I would break it up more so into, if I this is me putting my own 2 cents to my own spin on it. There's the technical side. There is the blend of technical and art, which is technically art if you want to get really pedantic, split some hairs. And then there's testing, because testing is part of the iterative process, and that is a really, really, really huge part of the whole scheme, the whole situation, with developing a game. Without testing, you get things like a lot of those broken shovelware games that popped out on the SNES way back when. You get a lot of that shovelware Wii stuff that happened a while back. Um, you know, the whole thing kind of falls apart if you don't balance out the three aspects, three different systems that are in place. And obviously, communication is an absolutely massive, massive part of the whole thing.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. Um, so do you have any like good examples on like off the top of your head that would be as a way of like that as a way to describe good game design per se? Because I know Roger brought up the Rehydrated series, and for me, I like to bring up Super Mario Odyssey, or like specifically like Super Mario 64, where they had like these. Normally, the game was and people played it initially, but there was some people who played the game a lot and beat it, and it's very like sandboxes ish, and there was so much relative free movement that people found a way to get on certain places that normally one person wouldn't be able to get to, and people would think, oh, this I found this really niche area, and I thinking, oh, I think I just broke the game, and then what they find later is like a pile full of coins near them, which is like the developer's way of saying, oh, we knew you'd come up here. And I guess like, do you have any like examples of something like little like fun trinkets like that?
I wouldn't say anything so specific.
Yeah.
Um, I in I would definitely say the game has to just be fun.
Okay.
Um, I mean, there are games out there that have been, the game, it was intended to be one thing and it ended up playing completely different how the developers intended, and it became something totally and completely different. The original Dota is a perfect example of that. That's a Warcraft 3 mod. Came out of an RTS, and suddenly it spawned an entire new genre of games because the players wanted something different, even though they loved the original game. And so I would definitely say that the core concept is fun. Um, and every game is going to have parts of it that aren't as fun, but they need to be good enough to get the player, to the fun parts or the more fun parts as you go along. It's kind of got to bridge that gap, and the gaps cannot be too big.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Um, so what would you think is how would you say your personal experience is going into this type of genre of a work field? Because I know like what would be your personal experiences while trying to learn stuff about game design? Like, did you struggle with it? Did you enjoy it? Or like any key moments?
If you don't mind me taking the reins again, for me, it was actually very much a struggle to decide. Um, Coming out of high school, I was very unsure of myself. I hadn't picked a college yet. I hadn't really picked a major or anything. I considered three separate fields, three very vastly different fields um, of career. I considered following my dad's footsteps of going into the Navy. I considered psychology, and then I considered something technical with computers, but I didn't really know what. Um, I didn't really think I had what it took to be a video game designer. Um, and then a buddy of mine dragged me to an open house at Columbia downtown. Um, and oh man, I saw the department and I knew where home was.
Wow.
um, and when I got there, I was intimidated. I was, again, unsure of myself. I had very little confidence in my abilities. Um, but, having good classmates, having a friend in school that followed, we went together, um, and having decent teachers very much gave me a lot of that confidence I needed. Mostly not because of what they taught me, but they taught me, I mean, yes, what they taught me, but they didn't just teach me technical skill. I had that already. They taught me how to learn more effectively and efficiently, and how to communicate better than I already was. And those things have led to my success in school, not just, learning the basic technical stuff.
Interesting. All right. How about you, Roger?
I think I kind of, at least from the beginning, had a different viewpoint, because when I went into applying for college and everything, I already knew what I wanted to do. I knew where I was going to go, and I knew that I was going to start my career in that. And so it was like, oh yeah, I knew I was going to Columbia. I had gone there multiple times on like open houses and just tours in general and everything. And the department that really fascinated me the most was the interactive arts and media department, because I just absolutely adored all the like animations, all of the game design, all the character modeling, everything that was available there, all of the tech, all of the like drawing tablets and everything. It just really intrigued me at that moment. It just sort of re-cemented that idea that I wanted to go for game design. I wanted to be able to create my own experiences, my own stories that I could just like immerse people into, or at least immerse myself into, because I knew where everything was going to go. And it's like very much like Eric said, it was very intimidating to be there seeing everything. Like it was cool and everything, like it was very intriguing, but it was also like, wow, you're gonna have to learn like the programming languages, how all of the like systems work, how like Visual Studio and Unity and Unreal, and how like it all works together to create like working effects, moving characters, and like interactive objects and everything. So like to me, it was like, whoa, this is insane. But I still thought that it was a good idea to keep going with it. There were some moments where I was like, oh Jesus, this is killing me slowly. But like in the end, watching the product, at least mostly programming wise for me, watching it all come together and execute what I wanted it to execute was just, it was really fulfilling. So I was like, I need to stay on this.
Interesting. And this goes into like a next thing of necessarily how hard it is per se. What what advice do you necessarily have for any like people who want to go into game design? What's like what would be like a key pitch you'd want to high school, to say high schoolers?
Computers are hard. And I mean that in
Yes.
the most encouraging way possible. I had the good fortune of growing up in a very technically capable household. My mother was an X-ray tech in hospitals, so she worked with a lot of complicated, very expensive machinery. My dad, and my grandfather on my mom's side were both teaching me computers from the age of 3 years old. So I was taking them apart at 5 and building them at like 10. And so, I was very familiar with computers, technology, and all that stuff. And I understand that a lot of people don't have that advantage in life. Um, that doesn't mean there's no hope. Not at all. There were people in some of my classes in junior year who barely knew their way around a computer and they were still making it work. Because all you really need to be able to do is, well, A, you have to be willing to learn the technology, learn how to kind of marry your hardware. Um, if you can figure out how to just become comfortable with a computer in any sense of that, that will help you immensely. Just being willing, um, but once you can figure that out, the doors open up and you will have a lot more possibilities in front of you. Because it's not easy. It's going to take a lot of work. Even for me, there are a lot of things I had to learn. Um, but learning how to learn and being, again, comfortable with the technology on any level will get you very far, because you can always build on what you already know.
Oh, for sure. I definitely agree. I had like the opposite experience. It's like Hugo can testify to a lot of this, is I never really had a lot of technology in my life. At least I couldn't afford to have technology in my life. So whenever I did get something or something went wrong, it was like, I need to like look it up, go on the internet, go to the library, do something so I can fix it and keep it with me. I mean, it happened with my PlayStation 2. It happened with my SNES, it happened with my iPod, it happened with everything. I figured out how to like take apart and then rebuild everything myself so that I could keep using it into the future for who knows how many years. Like I've had some of this stuff for like basically 20 years now, like since I was like 1 or 2, and it's like it still hasn't worn out. I mean, I still have my PlayStation 2 from kindergarten. It's gone through relentless number of smacks. I fixed like 6 controllers already, and but it all ends up working together. And it's like I think that I could also I don't want to ever revisit that trauma of high school, but like I will thank it for giving me the sense of self needed to like be proactive and sort of teach myself how to do things, because like sure they taught things and the teachers were like pretty good, but sometimes I just didn't feel like I was learning anything from them. So then when we had to like turn in assignments and stuff like that, I taught myself how to do the math. I taught myself how to do the reading. I taught myself how to like interpret English language and everything. So it's like being able to have that confidence and being able to look up the things on the internet or go to the library or ask people for help and figure out the things myself, I think really helped with being able to get into the industry, because then it was like, okay, well, if I don't have anyone to ask, or if I don't have like the library as a resource or something, then maybe I can use the internet, figure out how to program all of the things myself, double, triple, quadruple check all of my programming, all of my design, all of my models to make sure that the Unity wasn't crashing or any of my projects were crashing. It was just like being able to push myself to be able to check everything and then check it again and then check it a fourth time to make sure everything worked correctly and the projects were the way I wanted them to be.
1000% respect for that. Absolutely. Completely agree.
It's so encouraging to hear you both talk about like learning about your process of learning and how that is so important, and how your college experiences really has helped you know, grow that skill, because I think it's something that is really missing in the workforce in general, and not just in the world of video games and everything. I am curious to know what the process was like for applying to your schools and your programs. Did they require a portfolio? Like, what kind of experience did you have to show that you had with game design?
So with me, I don't know how much the process changed after I came to Columbia, but I applied in, what was it, end of 2011 that I applied. And Columbia in particular is very good. They're very open and accepting of people. They don't actually really test you on anything. They really just want your college transcripts, and they want to see you actually like showed up. And then they basically just wanted an essay on why you're passionate about what you want to do. And they, there was no test, there was no portfolio required, because that's something that you built while you were there. Um, and I mean, that's very much the case for me, at least. We built our portfolio when we were there. We learned everything we needed. Like, having a portfolio sure would help, but it doesn't gain you extra brownie points or anything getting into the school. I mean, it's a school that when I applied had an 80% acceptance rate, because basically, again, they just wanted to know that you gave any kind of care about going and being in that school. Um, and I think that really helps a lot of people, kind of boost their confidence, because if you're not afraid of getting rejected, then you're going to be more honest, you're going to be more open, and you're going to show more of yourself rather than just try to play the system.
So as long as, if I'm correct, if I'm correct or reiterating, as long as like it is, aside from having like some type of experience or skill, as long as you show up and obviously show that you have like a drive, it's definitely a good starting point.
Yes, definitely. That's what they want to see. They want to see that twinkle in your eye. They want to know that you have, again, any kind of care for what you want to do. And as long as they can see that, then you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really changed from when I applied, which was like, what, 2017? Like, it really hasn't changed much at all, which was actually something I really liked about Columbia, was that they were willing to, like, accept anyone, even if they had a portfolio or not. It's like, as long as you showed that you were willing to put in the effort, that you were passionate about what you wanted to do, and you were ready to hit it, like, right when you got there, they were like, go ahead, you can have zero experience, you could be from like, don't even know the language here, you're welcome here, we'll teach you as much as we can and get you as far as you can go.
Amazing.
It was my favorite part about Columbia.
So this is actually a question for Taylor now.
Oh,
So for those who don't know, Taylor's is a librarian, and she also has experience working with a lot of high schoolers. And my question is, at what point do you would you want to like try to point someone towards like game design per se, or anything towards the field of video games?
so I saw a lot of teens. So I, for years, worked at UMedia Chicago at the Harold Washington Library, the big teen center. And I mostly did video game based programs. I do not have a background in game design or programming. So what I did was more, let's talk about games. Because teenagers don't, and really a lot of people don't get much of a platform to express why they love video games and why games are great. So we did, this the first iteration of this podcast and other videos. And because I was working with a group of young people who absolutely loved video games, that's why they were there. I came across a lot of teens who wanted to go into the game design field. Um, and my kind of approach to career counseling, it was really about like do your homework, understand what the field is. I also put together a lot of career days, and I did 2 game design career days, or the video game field career days. And, we had indie developers come. We had, people come from the only AAA studio in Chicago, NetherRealm, and understanding there are really different experiences in different kinds of game careers. There's AAA, which looks different. If you're doing the technical, that's different than doing art, than being an indie developer. So really trying to understand, why do you love games? Do you really want to make them? Because if you love something, you think, oh, I really want to make this thing, but then it's not particularly suited to your skill set or your general like attitude of like what you like want work to look like. I always told teens, always ask the question, like, what does your average day look like in this field? I mean, you probably don't want to go into game design if you don't like sort of sitting in front of a computer all day. So really getting them to ask questions that weren't just about like, I love this thing, I want to do this thing, but like, okay, how will this really fit in with the life that you want? And that's really hard to unpack when you are, 16, 17, 18. But I mean, we had professionals there. You could ask those questions and start thinking about it and reflecting on it. Um, you know, I definitely like Roger is studying game design. A couple other teens did, but some teens I think realized that their passion for video games wasn't actually really about game design. It was about something else. One of the alumni of the Library of Games program is actually becoming a librarian right now. And he realized what his passion was, like the discourse about talking about video games was actually the thing he loved. And then kind of the information sharing, seeking element of, researching and writing about pieces of video games was what he loved, that drove him to libraries. So, not everyone who loves video games is going to go into a game design career. But, I tried to help them understand what the different options are. That was a very long answer to your question.
No, I think that actually summed up a lot of what would be appropriate, because I think as someone who originally wanted to, my personal experience is I wanted to explore the concept of video games for like majority of my life. And then obviously when I was around that age of choosing colleges, I decided it wasn't really my forte, where I think the process kind of like eluded away. And plus I was always afraid of, I love video games so much, I don't want to hate my work if it is video games. And that was obviously a biggest fear. And my opinion of that has changed throughout the years, but I think like it's always important to always look into like a perspective of like what can lead to you towards that field, because it couldn't always be game design. I'm considering like video game sound design, or even soundtrack wise, and or like art for the video game. There's so many different levels to making a video game that I think are not really shed to light, like such as like voice acting, such as obviously graphic designing, and I could be missing some, because obviously this is not my field of work. But it's definitely something that I think teenagers should definitely be more open to, per se, especially if they want to pursue video games. And I think your response to it was actually really appropriate from a mentorship perspective.
Yeah, and it's something working with students who are interested in creative fields. There's also the whole business side of the industry, you know, publishing, marketing, all of that. So you can be near video games, but not necessarily part of like the actual creation process of the game.
Hmm. And that goes into my next question. How does that actually work between making a game and then obviously go into the publishing side with marketing and kind of get into the consumer perspective? Like what would be the relationship you think would have to be needed?
It's really nebulous, at least until you get into the kind of upper echelon of things, um, because there's a lot of different. It's a weird web, because there's the developing studio that is making the game. Sometimes they self-publish, sometimes they don't. If there's an external publisher, then there's a lot of weird connections going on. Mostly those connections are fostered and created by the upper management of the company, who are more the business people than the actual developers and designers and regular members of the team that creates the game. Um, and of course, there's also the factors of, well, is it first party, as in, is this company making the game owned by a company that produces a box to play the games on? What's the budget like? Hundreds of other tiny little weird factors. Um, and then if you're independent, if you're an independent developer and you don't, technically publish at all, you release the game on some platform like Steam or, Xbox Live Market or Nintendo Switch, the digital marketplace, whatever Nintendo calls it nowadays. Um,
I think it's called the eShop.
yeah, there you go. They've changed the name like 9 times over the year. I lost track. Um, but yeah, no. So I mean, there is a business side to it, very much so. There definitely is marketing. There's HR. It's just like any other company in the world. Just your product, your whatever you're pushing out the door. At the end of the day, is a very different thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what was it? I recently saw a documentary. I believe it was Double Fine Studios.
Oh,
Oh
It was
yeah.
it
I
was a
love Double
documentary.
Fine.
Yeah, it was a documentary on their game Grim Fandango, and then
Which is one of my favorite games of all time.
yeah, and but
Love
it
it.
kind of what it did was it kind of showed the difference between like the studios developing games by themselves and self-publishing as compared to like working under a publisher like say like Sony or things like that, like big companies that are usually pushing out the products and everything. Like it really showed the difference because they sort of had to like self-fund and like crowdfund and everything and get the money in order to create the game. And then it's like going from there, it's like they planned everything themselves. They grabbed resources from different teams that were already developing things for publishing companies. And so it's like they sort of had the creative freedom to do what they wanted with the game. They had the time, they had the space, they had the people in order to create, I believe it was actually Broken Age. Yeah, because they
Mm-hmm.
were funding Broken Age.
Mm-hmm.
And they had full control over the process of creating Broken Age, and when it came out, and it was actually a pretty good game, at least from my perspective. And but like as compared to everything else, it was strange seeing how they had to argue at least a little for like resources, because they still had to leave members of their own team to develop things for separate publishing companies, separate studios, separate like ideas. And so it's like they didn't have control over that, at least not as much as they wanted to. They didn't have the control over those products that they were producing than they did over Broken Age.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So with everything given on for different studios and obviously the both business and like this creative side of video games, I have a hypothetical question for both of you guys. If you had the opportunity, like just full guaranteed position, would you work for would you want to design off a AAA title, or would you want to work on an indie game or an indie title? My biggest examples would be like if you want to work for like a AAA, like I guess like say stuff like EA per se, or awkward design, or it's like something like really on a small team, like I guess Hollow Knight, like stuff like that.
I think I would have preferred to work on some small team like Hollow Knight, Team Cherry, making Hollow Knight and everything like that, because you can really tell the passion, the creativity, and how they actually like when they start building all of the features and everything, how they go for the more fun aspect, the more intriguing things, the stuff that will really pull you in. My biggest worry with working at like a AAA studio is that like Eric said before, the business people won't really understand to the same depth as the team that you're working with. So even if you are creating like really good features, or you find one aspect of the game really fun, and you're like, oh, maybe it's better to iterate on this one process and keep going and build a game from there, the business side of game design will be like, hey, no, we asked you for this, and this, and we need it by this day, and we need you to complete this milestone by this time. And so instead of continuing to work on the like really fun aspect of the game, you have to produce everything that they want you to produce, and then push it out to them and be like, oh yeah, okay, well, here's the game that you wanted, instead of being like, oh, we found this really fun thing, can we propose this idea to you, and then sort of change the plan and go to that.
Yeah, they kind of treat it like regular software development sometimes, and that's dangerous.
Can I ask why? Actually, I'm just curious.
Um, from how I understand it, and it was explained to me by some of the teachers I had when I was at Columbia. These teachers have either moved up or moved on from regular teaching. But I learned from Lewis Harris, who has a very large resume and list of games that he's worked on, as well as Tom Dowd and quite a few others that have been in the industry. Um, and they explained it in the sense of a lot of the people who go into the business side of game development, um, uh, not all of them, obviously. I don't know what the ratio is, but some of them are doing it just because it's a job in business. And so they're not making their decisions based on what they think is fun for the player. They're not making the decision based on the consumers. They're making decisions based on what is most profitable for the company, what makes us look good, PR, that kind of stuff. What has the best result for this company, or in some cases, how does this benefit me personally? And granted, that is not the short-sighted view of, again, most people in the game industry. But there are some of the suits, as people refer to them as, that just they see it as any other industry. They don't understand what makes it unique, what makes it different, distinct, and so their decisions tend to reflect that.
Interesting, and I think that I've read a little bit on some aspects of it where that kind of shows of, I guess it goes into the saying of, you get what you put in per se, and I think it's like we have like, and then I mentioned a lot of just indie titles per se because like I think those show in a lot of effort with a lot of minuscule budgets per se. Like my biggest thing that comes to mind is like Undertale, where it was literally a Kickstarter. Was it a Kickstarter? I think it was a Kickstarter. Yeah, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I can't remember, but it didn't have a lot of funding, and when it came out, it just blew up. And obviously, it's one of the best indie games out there.
And it's a technical mess.
Is it really?
Under the hood, that game runs. From what I've been told, I've never dug into the code myself. I don't think it's public. For people who have like hacked it and cracked it open, they said, and even Toby Fox himself has been like, yeah, it's kind of a mess. Like it runs well because it's low res and like simple, not because it's well coded.
It sounds like it's more of a hard coding problem, less than a sort of like adaptable system, because that's
Yeah.
actually a lot of what they try to teach us. They're like, don't hard code anything in. Try to make everything as flexible as possible. If you're going to put variables and things in, make sure that they can be edited, changed, modified as much as possible without actually affecting all of the entirety of the code. Because if you hard code anything in and something goes wrong, you're going to spend hours, days, weeks, months trying to figure out what went wrong, how it affects everything, and then trying to fix it.
Yeah, Toby Fox, that was actually, Undertale was his first actual game development project ever.
Really?
And
Wow.
he just, I mean, there is luck is a skill, as we say in trading card games. And
It is part of the cards.
I think there is a hint of that in his project, because he struck gold. He hit the mother lode that one time, and Deltarune was definitely good. I actually like Deltarune more than regular Undertale. But like, you're never gonna capture that lightning in a bottle again.
Interesting. That's definitely a different perspective. I never would have thought about Undertale per se.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't game design exciting?
A little bit, yeah. All right. Then this goes into my next fun part. This is more a little on current events, and this can go for Taylor as well, for everyone. What do you guys think and or most excited about the next generation of consoles?
All right, so I'll take the reins on this one again, I suppose. Because I have that large technical background, so I geek out about every reveal of any little piece of hardware or software or whatever. So as a developer, I'm losing my mind over the Unreal Engine update reveal.
That was nice.
Because my God, it's gorgeous. And granted, that's a controlled environment. They they were able to script everything very precisely to show off the best possible situation. But still, like, that technology is going to be usable for the next maybe decade to come. And it seeing what is possible makes me wonder what they haven't considered as possible, because you can do literally anything with programming. Anything. You just have to figure out how. And so that's why I get excited about the software stuff. But the hardware, I'm extremely excited for both the new mainline consoles. I don't even play that many console games. I'm a PC guy, and I love PC mostly, but I do own consoles, and I'm really, really excited for the steps, for the leaps forward that Sony and Microsoft are taking in their hardware, because it's about time. It's about time.
Crash 4?
Ah! I grew up on Crash Bandicoot, and one of my teachers actually worked on it at Columbia. I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
I like the idea. I like the new generation consoles and everything. I've actually recently started trying to get more into like the technical aspects of hardware on consoles and software on consoles. But like, my biggest thing, and the thing that makes me laugh internally so much when I'm trying to like record and stuff, and whenever I think about it, I just try to stifle my laugh, is that this is going to be a nightmare for artists, because they were going to have to make these models, render these models. They were just explaining in the reveal the number of like polygons and tries that were going just into the environment, just into the characters, and the size and scope that these files are going to take. So imagine these poor artists having to slave away at creating these super hyper realistic models of either the environment, of items, of characters, of expressions. It's just, it's like, I'm excited for what's to come, but I still, like, it makes me laugh and it makes me kind of sad at the same time, because this is going to be
gotta put in that work.
that actually something I would want to mention. This job is thankless. No matter who you are, you're not thanked enough in this industry. Programmers, they reiterate their code, they try to re-optimize, they try to fix glitches, bugs, and issues. The joke, one of my favorite jokes of programmers is 99 bugs on the wall. You take one down, pass it around, 125 bugs on the wall.
Yep.
Never gonna squash every glitch and bug in a video game. artists, they're redoing assets, and oh well, this isn't glowy enough, or I think this should be a different shade of green, and they're or this character's nose should be a little bit more elongated,
So,
and
so it's like people complaining of what they don't really fully know about.
it's not
Exactly.
even that. It's more so just that in the work environment, like everybody has something that they're constantly doing over and over, breaking their back to make this game work and look good and just be the best it can be. And, you can thank each other all you want, but like what's going on. You're just doing the same thing over and over again like any other job. And it is what it is.
It just makes me.
Before we even go back on this topic, I very much think it's very thankless because my favorite video game developer is Masahiro Sakurai, which if you don't know who that is,
That poor man. That poor man.
that is the creator of the Super Smash Brothers series and
That
also
poor-
the inventor of Kirby. But no, I've just heard horror stories
He needs to
Uh,
retire.
of
He
how
does it
much.
to himself a little bit, though.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that is true. But like,
it just shows how much passion you guys have.
Oh, yeah.
Per
mhm.
se, and I've read so much of his, like, he writes an article like what's I don't know what the word, panel, pillar, something.
Blog.
Yes, he writes something, okay, and weekly, and then essentially
It sounds like a blog.
yeah, he just writes so much how he's so tired and it's like, I'm never gonna get a vacation because we keep asking him for more, and it just goes to the point of to go thank Mr. Sakurai and never ask him for anything ever again. Because at this point, this is like the third time in a row where we've gotten like a Super Smash Brothers game, when in reality Melee or Brawl was supposed to be the last one because he hates making sequels and he only
He
keeps
actually
doing
was
it.
he was sent on a forced vacation once, actually. Nintendo
Oh.
actually recognized, like, dude, you're working yourself to death. Take a week off or else.
And there was that one point where he was strapped. He was developing on the game and he was strapped to an IV bag.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he's that's not how it should be, actually, ideally.
Yeah.
I mean, in the past, companies like Rockstar have come out and said, they've celebrated, like, oh, yeah, our employees put in 120-hour work weeks. That's not good. That means they're not seeing their families. That means they're not going home at night. And then, they kind of flip around. They're like, well, they kind of choose to, and it's like, you shouldn't allow that anyway. No matter what spin you put on it, that shouldn't be the case. So the industry is trying to figure out a way to move away from that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, it wasn't. I keep hearing that was like a big issue because I remember at some point like Rockstar kept, supposedly word got around that it kept overworking and underpaying their developers for like Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh yeah, it's not just
Mhm.
them either. It's EA
Uh-huh.
did it. A few other companies. There's one company in the Illinois region, Midwest. There's actually a support group for families of people who work at that company,
Aww.
and they actually just kind of work with each other to help raise their families together because their spouses and significant others and whatever are working there, and they just never get time off. And that's not the norm in the industry. Please
Okay.
don't ever think that's the norm.
Yeah. No, please.
But
Yeah.
like, it happens. So you need to be able, that's one skill you have to be able to have going into this industry or any industry really with any adult job. Know when to walk away.
Yep.
Know when your health is more important than your job.
That was definitely. I'm so glad you clarified that because honestly, I thought that was the norm for a little bit. Where it's like, because that's how everyone thinks. It's like you have to keep working, go, go, go. And I always see developers. It's all I ever hear about that. And seeing that you guys, oh, that's not the norm. I'm like, oh, I'm a little taken back by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're thinking about is crunch culture,
Mm-hmm.
which
Okay.
is like sort of taken a hard hold on the industries. Like, it's better not to think of that as the norm, but it does happen kind of often, a little too often, where they're just like completely overworking the workers. At this point, it's basically like losing. If you want to think of it from like a game perspective or from like a show perspective or anything, it's like using your HP to power your mana.
Ah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good metaphor. That's a whole. I mean, really, it is a whole separate topic of discussion. I could sit here and explain the massively interconnected factors for hours and hours and waste all of your time forever. Um, but yeah, it is an unfortunate reality in some sections of the industry. Yes.
Because
Whoa.
Thought
I'm
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and because I'm a librarian, book recommendation. There's a really interesting book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. That every chapter follows the story of a different game being developed and the culture at different companies, and it touches on AAA companies, little indie projects, small indie companies, one person making a game. Stardew Valley is one of the games in there. And I think it gives a pretty interesting broad overview of the different ways game development can look at different levels. Crunch culture is definitely talked a lot about in that book, but there are also good examples of how that is not necessary and games can be made without that kind of culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've had that book recommended by a multitude of teachers. And I have a friend who worked at Jackbox. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with their party games. They are really fun games.
Mm-hmm.
And their version of Crunch was an extra 2 hours to the week for maybe 3 people. And that was it. So it really just depends. Because some companies, they actually do it right. Others
They
don't.
care.
It's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, would you say that things are kind of getting better and more aware then, per se? Because I know it's definitely getting. I know from a general consumer perspective, I'm seeing it a lot more come to light than how it used to be.
I mean, the way they were teaching it right now at Columbia, I feel like it is getting more recognition, at least with the people who are trying to go into the industry, because what they're trying to propose a lot is trying to instate Scrum development into the companies, so being able to grab that infrastructure and place it into game design. But the main idea behind implementing Scrum and everything was that it was sort of like a system to properly organize all the aspects that needed to be worked on, and then modifying that infrastructure to work with the company that you were at. So then it would grab that sort of base frame, and then you're able to change it and modify it so that it would create a more efficient system for development. So then now you wouldn't have crazy long crunch hours, or you wouldn't have to be creating multiple features all at once in one giant milestone, but rather iterate on the features in short sprints. So then you'd be going for week, 2 weeks, possibly a month of focusing on specific aspects. And then if you couldn't finish some aspects, it'd be put onto the backlog, and then it would be pushed into the next sprint. But it was basically complete as much as you can for the sprint. And if there's some things that you can't complete, then that's fine. It can be put in the backlog and pushed forward. And then you can sort of just test, fix, and create a more complete project by the end of the sprint.
Cool. All right. Well, enough on depressing talk. I want to go back to our big question. About oh no, I think it's great. I think it's great that we get that spawned a different type of important conversation that honestly I think I missed. So I'm glad it was brought up. And I think to segue back on my opinion of I want to talk about next gen again. I'm sorry, I had a big idea on it.
Massive tangent. I'll take the blame for that one. That's on me.
It was a side quest, okay? It was a really intriguing side quest, and we were just look, main game, you can wait.
All right. Honestly, I think for my perspective is really fun on how I see the next generation of consoles, because I definitely I like seeing console wars, because I always think competitiveness of both gaming consoles, specifically just Microsoft and Sony, it forces them to try to one up each other and just be better for the consumer. Because at the end of the day, the consumer has to benefit from it because they have to sell. And I think one of the big things I kept seeing more on, though, it was more on Sony's part than Microsoft, was there's a lot more games for one thing. I think I'm really excited for launch for when the PlayStation 5 comes out, and particularly everyone just keeps, this is the most technical era of next generation consoles I'm even hearing of, because all I'm hearing is ray tracing, haptic feedback, super powerful SSD, and I'm like, these are all just words to me.
I mean, like, if you looked up the actual, like,
No, I did.
and everything, it is actually, like, astonishing the work that they're doing,
I
the
even
lengths that they're going to, and the technology that they're developing is just
I even sat through that Sony conference where it's just talking about nothing but technical jargon, and I'm like, oh, okay, that seems kind of cool. So it's
Man.
definitely something a bit I'm excited for, especially when for trailers that show gameplay, because at some point, even if it's like early context of what the game can do, it looks phenomenal. And at that point, I think I remember having this conversation with Eric off screen where I think you mentioned this is technology that we wouldn't really be getting for another like 4 or 5 years, yet we're getting it so soon.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned the hardware because, like I said, I geek out about this stuff like crazy. Yeah, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were almost identical in hardware. Um, so, when I saw people arguing over that, I was like, who cares? Like, the hardware isn't what's important. What's important is how they use that hardware, which is where
Mhm.
Sony originally thrived because they had a small secondary processor on their PS4 to account for the processing power needed to record your gameplay on the fly. Microsoft didn't have that. So that was their slight advantage there, but then they got lazy with software development in their operating system, and Microsoft took the lead in that, where they were originally behind, and even though their system was just a smidgen weaker, they actually eked out more performance over Sony. And that back and forth is hilarious to watch the drama in because both companies want the other one to succeed just as much as themselves, which is kind of, counterintuitive, you'd think, for competing companies. But like Hugo said, you know, that fosters a competitive nature, a spirit of competition that makes them both push themselves harder to get ahead. Um, and where we're seeing that in the current generation of consoles is the storage mediums. Each company has developed their own proprietary storage device, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it is flash storage. It's an SSD, like you can put in anything, but their own version of it that puts a unique spin on it, and how they leverage that with the software is going to be intense. Because otherwise, those consoles are basically identical, just like before.
Nice.
I think the thing that really made me laugh about that was the immediate quote that came to mind was standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And the thing that the image that came to my mind was, yes, they want each company to like sort of succeed as well as themselves, but it's basically, oh, I'm the giant now, and then the other company sort of steps on the shoulders of like, say, Sony. So like Xbox stepping on Sony, and they're like, oh, well, we have the power now, and Sony's like, well, that's just what I was waiting for, so now I'm just going to step on your shoulder and be even taller than you.
Yeah, the industry kind of followed the hardware, at least for Sony and Microsoft in particular, kind of has this cycle of how do I put it? I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, but effectively, I guess I'll call it arrogance syndrome, where one company gets a massive leap up on the other somewhere in the cycle, right? And then they say, well, I'm on top. I don't need to worry about the guy below me. They're below me. What are they gonna do? Well, I mean, they're building a ladder. They're gonna climb up ahead of you. So you better do something about it. They're slower. They'll get here eventually, but by the time they get here, we'll be up there. It's tortoise and the hare situation. So it's just the difference of both people and the hare. Taking a break every so often, um, and so they kind of play this jumping game, the leapfrog of trying to get ahead of each other and then stopping, and then the other one jumps ahead. It's quite entertaining to watch just because it's drama and it's fun.
Awesome. Okay, Taylor, what do you think about
Oh,
this whole?
Hugo, you know me. I find it hard to care. Um,
Well, I mean,
Hey, you're
at least
honest.
something. You're honest. Honestly, I want your opinion on it. I'm definitely curious.
I mean, and what I play and what I'm interested in. I mean, I'm a PC gamer. My PS4 gathers dust.
Same.
Um, so and I think I'm so into like the tiny indie world where a lot of the indie games can run on anything, can run on my terrible like 7-year-old computer or laptop. That I just I think I I you know, I really respect the hardware, the the whole console development process. I do respect it. I just find it hard to care until we start talking about the games themselves.
That is perfectly fair.
Yeah. 'Cause
Then
you know
my
what?
thing is this then. What games have any games caught your attention then?
No.
Aw.
I mean, you know, I in the past, Sony has had better exclusives for their consoles or games that appeal to me more. I don't imagine that will change, but um, I also they're not the kind of games that capture my personal interest. So
What? And first of all, I think you need to give yourself a little more credit than what you think you deserve, only for the sake of what we just provided is just we have two people who are very high on the technical side of video games. I have someone who's very much into video games but on a little more casual side. And then of course I consider you as the casual market since you don't really care much, and I think your audience is going to be the hardest one for the companies to reach per se. Because I think that's just an issue with just trying to capture the casual market because
I don't know. Give me an interesting game. Like, give me something that I haven't seen before, or I play because I enjoy immersive experiences and compelling narrative. Um,
there's a game about that
so give me that.
snacks that it turns into the bugs that are snacks.
Bugs are snacks. What?
Yeah,
Any
that's one of
The
the
game
games.
is literally
Yeah,
called. Yeah, it's
that
literally
trailer
called
looked
Bug
fun.
Snacks.
All right. I have to check that out.
Yeah, that is my closest thing I can come up with on a fly.
I mean, Goodbye
I-
Volcano High. Everyone's
Uh,
hating on that right now, but like
but
it seems like it's meant to be an immersive story that's like more immersive than interactive. Like,
Alright.
you're supposed to watch it more than play
I don't
it.
know. Give me a short hike and Untitled Goose Game, things like
Ooh.
that. I'll be happy.
You gotta hit the niche, man.
Yeah.
That's where you gotta go. You gotta go non-mainstream.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to kind of close things out on a really good note. Before we wrap things up, do you guys have any final messages you would like to have to people listening in about like your field, like any like 10 words or less or anything like that?
I have trouble with 3D game design.
Fair enough. All right.
Man, I don't know, man.
I think we covered a lot of bases though today.
We did cover a
Yeah.
lot. Break out of your shell. I mean, that's really all I can say. Break out of your shell. Try new things. You know, you'll learn from failure more than you'll learn from success.
Awesome. Okay. So this, I think that'll wrap it up today then. Thank you guys. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Roger, for joining us in today's episode. You guys have been a great guest on how this conversation went.
Thank you for having me. My absolute pleasure. I'd be glad to come back or chat off camera, off headphones, whatever. I don't know.
Awesome.